in the midst of a series, as you can see, called Imitators. Last week was kind of an odd sermon. It's not a sermon I typically give. It was very topical, and it was kind of an introduction to what is laying the groundwork of what we need to talk about in this series. I propose that as humans, we are going to imitate something. It is how we learn. We learn by imitation, whether it is through school or imitating our parents or siblings, family members, friends. It is how we learn. And it is the line that I used last week. As humans, we will imitate something. The question is, what are you imitating? No, I'm not going to preach the same sermon this week. We're going to expand, actually, on the statement, as humans, we will imitate something. We're going to expand on this a little bit. And I essentially, we have this statement that we are going to imitate something. We have basically three choices, okay? Three basic choices of what to imitate. And again, these are just basic. We can take these and split them and make these a little bit more precise and fine-tune them a little bit. But three basic ideas. We can imitate the world, okay? The world and its idolatry and its idolatrous nature. We have talked about this a lot, okay? We can imitate cultural churchianity. We can imitate the church. The church who attempts to look at these things through friendship with the world. James 4:3 and 4:4, which we are going to spend some time at this morning. James chapter 4, verse 3 and 4 says this. It says, "You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives so that you may spend it on your pleasures." Actually, yes, it is right. I'm sitting here like second guessing myself. So let me start again. 4:3. "You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives so that you may spend it on your pleasures. You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility towards God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." A couple of verses before that, he goes, "What's the source of quarrels and conflicts among you?" How many churches have issues with quarrels and conflicts? Most of them. At one point, all of them. It's part of human nature, unfortunately. He goes on to say, is not the source of your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And then he goes in and says, you ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. This is the world, the church of the world. It is attempting to be friends with the world. Our third choice is simply to discover what Jesus actually does and imitate that. So we can imitate the world, we can imitate cultural churchianity, or we can imitate Jesus himself. It's the three choices basically that we've got. You can go and break them down a little bit more, but I mean, that's the three basic ideas. We're going to compare and contrast these three options throughout this series. Today, we are going to look at the first two. We're going to look at the world and we're going to look at the church. Imitating the world and imitating the church. We have talked a lot about idolatry over the last year and a half or so. So I'm not going to hit this very heavy. We're just going to kind of do just a quick overview and a reminder. 3 John 11, beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. 1 Corinthians 10, 14. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. Flee from idolatry. You see, we've kind of gone over this whole idea that there are these spiritual beings in the spiritual realm who are clamoring for our worship, clamoring to take the place of God. It's why Lucifer fell in the beginning. It's why he fell, because he was trying to take the place of God, because he thought he was all that and a bag of chips. You see, God commands repeatedly to not take part in the idolatry of the nations around them. Don't do this. Don't do that. A lot of the commandments are centered around behaviors and acts that are directly correlated to the worship of idols. Okay? Romans, Paul takes this idea and condenses it into this section here in Romans 1, 18 to 32. And we've read this, we've preached this. Everybody in this room is going to sit here and probably at least agree on the basic notion of what Paul is talking here about how unbelief, how they've traded the worship of God and worshiped the created things instead, whether animals or actual lesser gods. I have proposed before that the culture of Romans 1, 18 to 32 was not only the Roman culture, but if this is an American culture, I don't know what is. Find me a better description of the culture in America than Romans 1, 18 to 32. It is essentially the problem with the world. It is idolatrous. It has traded the worship of the actual God for lesser gods, and yet has fallen into the traps of sexual immorality, of being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossip, slanders, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful. I mean, it goes on. We're talking laundry list here. And he goes through all of this, and yet we get to verse 32. Not only do they practice these things, 32 says this, and although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give a hearty approval to those who practice them. Our culture is trying to get us to celebrate idolatrous sinfulness. Is it not? It is. It's trying to get us to agree with this. And the Christians in the room are going, don't want any part of it. Sorry. Because these things, this laundry list of behavioral sins that are listed here go back to one core problem, is that that's worship. They're worshiping idols. They've got idolatry in their life. So we've been through this a lot. We've talked about this. This is just kind of a brief overview here. But the question that I bring at the end of this overview is this question: what actually is idolatry? We've talked about it, but what is the actual definition of idolatry? Idolatry is, and this one's in your notes, idolatry is this: it is literally the manipulation of the spiritual world for our benefit. That is idolatry. It is the manipulation of the spiritual world for our benefit. The problem is that the church has succumbed to idolatry as well, no different than the Hebrews of the Old Testament. There's a book out there. I'm going to pick one specific area that idolatry has crept into the church. Don't hear me that this is the only place. Okay, I'm going to pick on prayer. Okay, because it's the one thing that we can identify with the most. All of us, every Christian, we can identify with prayer. I'm going to go through some examples of where idolatry has crept into our prayer life. Guy by the name of Mark Batterson. Anybody ever heard of Mark Batterson? A lot of head shaking. Okay, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. But anyway, Mark Batterson wrote this book. It's called like The Circle Prayer or Draw a Circle or whatever it's called. This is the excerpt off of the back of this book. Do you ever sense that there's far more to prayer and to God's vision for your life than what you're experiencing? It's time you learned from the legend of the Honai the circle maker, a man bold enough to draw a circle in the sand and not budge from inside it until God answered his prayers for his people. What impossibly big dream is God calling you to draw a prayer circle around? Sharing inspiring stories from his own experiences as a circle maker, Mark Batterson will help you uncover your heart's deepest desires and God-given dreams and unleash them through the kind of audacious prayer that God delights to answer. Can you hear the idolatry in that very description just on the back page? Basically what he says is draw a line in the sand, draw a circle around yourself, pray a prayer, and don't move until God answers it. Is that not the definition of idolatry, manipulating the spiritual world for my benefit? I hate to tell you, but apparently he's never heard the saying that it's not about you. I'm just saying, brother, it's not about you. It is not about your wants and your desires. It is not about your happiness. Your happiness is not God's problem. Sorry, but it's not. I don't know that God's concerned with our happiness. He is concerned, however, with our salvation and sanctification. That is what he's concerned with, not necessarily our happiness. This is a book called The Prayer of Jabez. You may have heard of this one. This one's from better part of 15 to 20 years ago. I remember I actually have this book in my office. I think it's sitting on my desk at the moment. And I remember getting this book, and I had briefly read through it years ago. This is the description from the back of the Prayer of Jabez. And it's actually, the Prayer of Jabez is taken directly from Scripture, 1 Chronicles 4:10, Old Testament, not New. This is the description. It says, "Are you ready to reach for the extraordinary, to ask God for the abundant blessings He longs to give you? Join Bruce Wilkinson to discover how the remarkable prayer of a little-known Bible hero can release God's favor, power, and protection. You'll see how one daily prayer can help you leave the past behind and break through to the life you were meant to live. All right, Joel Osteen. Live your best life now. Okay. While I get the concept of what you're getting at, and don't necessarily think that you are entirely wrong, it still leans self-centered. What was it that James 4 said again? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives so that you may spend it on your pleasures. I had a friend, colleague, church minister, was talking about being more effective in your prayer, putting on a class and whatnot. And while I think I would speak for most Christians in saying that they want a better prayer life, let me fine tune. Remember that preciseness we talked about last week? Precision matters. Let me take that and take the lens of the camera and see if we can't fine tune that statement a little bit. Maybe it's not necessarily a more effective prayer life that we seek, but a more biblical one. Because praying more effectively still denotes an idea of idolatry. It's a prideful statement. All three of these examples are idolatry, attempting to attempting to manipulate the spiritual world for our benefit. I got a couple of questions. I want you to kind of think about them for a second. Why are we praying the things that we're praying? Have you ever thought about that? Why are we praying the things that we're praying? How about this question? Why are our prayers not being answered? That's an interesting thought. Why are our prayers not being answered? Have you prayed a prayer multiple times? Maybe you want God to take some kind of sinful something or other from you, and you're just, He's not taking it. Not taking it away. He's not taking a situation in your life, maybe a bad relationship with a family member, or a rough relationship with a friend or a coworker, or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't seem like that prayer is getting answered. Let's go back to James. Let me read through verse 10. Okay. I picked up on James 4, 2, and 3, and 4. And then, as Ricky was talking about last week, I can't help but put this into context. So I read the entire section here, and it just, wow. I read 2, 3, and 4 in chapter 4. I read those 4 verses. Let me read those 4 verses and continue on. Because remember, in James 3, what did he just get done talking about? Taming the tongue, right? With that said, keep this in mind as we read chapter 4, the verse 10 verses. What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasures. You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility towards God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you think that the Scripture speaks to no purpose? He jealously desires the Spirit which He has made to dwell in us, but He gives a greater grace. Therefore, it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be miserable and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy into gloom. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and He will exalt you. You see, churches have fallen prey to the idolatrous attitude of the world that is completely focused on our own wants and desires. We ask for things very selfishly. We want God to make us healthy and wealthy. We want God to rescue us from the things we believe that we need rescuing from. Let me propose this possibility in the form of a question. Do you have the boldness to not pray for what you want, but for the will of God instead? Let me tell you what, that is a hard prayer to pray. To pray for God's will, not what you want. That is very, very hard. Let me skip back to the Old Testament. Let me give a few more examples here. Everybody's going to probably be familiar with these verses. I picked them for that reason, because most people know them. Jeremiah 29:11. Sherry's over here going, yep, I knew it. Jeremiah 29:11 is probably one of the most famous verses quoted around graduation time. Ave, you're going to graduate this year. I guarantee you're going to get a lot of stuff with Jeremiah 29:11 on it. But it's not for graduates. Jeremiah 29:11. Let me kind of go there. Let's put this verse into context. Ready? This is just one verse prior to 29:11. This is verse 10. For thus says the Lord, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you, to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and you will find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and will gather you from all the nations, from all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord. And I will bring you back to the place from where I sent you into exile. What is Jeremiah 29:11 actually referring to? Israel, bringing the Israelites out of their captivity to Babylon. This is not for graduates. Now, with that said, as my family and everybody laughs, let me also say this. Is it wrong to say that God knows the plans that He has for you? Absolutely not. it is partially correct. What's the issue here? It's a fine-tuning precision issue. That is the issue. It is not wrong to tell somebody that God knows the plans that he has for you. But also, I would urge you, if you do use this, couple that with the verse right behind it. What is the verse behind? You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Seek the Lord where he may be found. When you quote 29:11 to a graduate, seek me. This is the context they need. Seek the Lord. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. Be a seeker of the Lord. What happened to Israel after exile? They were conquered by nations. Christ came and rebuked them. The temple was destroyed for the second time. And they spent 2,500 years dispersed in the wilderness before they were gathered back as a nation in 1948. Does this mean that 29:11 is not true? No, it means it's not been fulfilled yet. What has not been fulfilled? Well, this actually is referring to an eternal time. It is referring to a second coming. I know the plans that I've got for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Yeah, that hope is in Jesus Christ. Yeah. Let me go to another really, really popular, especially the last year. Been popular before that, but it has really, really, really come up the last year and a half or so. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Know that one too. I figured. See, 2 Chronicles 7:14 is actually God's response to Solomon after he dedicates the temples and prays. Solomon, back in chapter 5, brings the ark into the temple. God's glory then fills the temple. Solomon dedicates the temple in the first part of chapter 6. The second part of chapter 6 is his prayer of dedication. Then chapter 7 goes on, talks about the Shekinah glory, the sacrifices offered, the feast of dedication. And God then responds in 7:11. This is God's response. Let's pick it up in verse 11. Thus Solomon finished the house of the Lord in the king's palace and successfully completed all that he had planned on doing in the house of the Lord and in his palace. Then the Lord appeared to Solomon at night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. If I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer offered in this place. For now I have chosen and consecrated this house that my name has been there, that my name may be there, and that my name may be there forever. And my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. This prayer is specific to Israel, because if you read the prayer of Solomon, he prays these things. Talks about famine, he talks about pestilence, he talks about this stuff. And God is answering Solomon in his prayer. This prayer is specific to Israel. What the church in America is attempting to do is idolatrous. They are attempting to make America Israel. America is not Israel. There's no more to be said about it. America is not Israel. This is not God's chosen land. That's what the Mormons believe. That's why they built their temple in Utah. It is idolatrous to propose a substitution for America for Israel. Now, are we blessed because we're friends with Israel? Well, that would go to show in past years, administrations that come that are not on the side of Israel, things don't go as well. It is a manipulation of the spiritual realm for our benefit. Here's my question to those praying this prayer to restore America. Why do you want to see America restored? Is it because of our comfort? Do we want to go back to the days of old where things were comfortable? That's not of God. When is it that Christians have had the most furthering of the gospel? It is not when we have the majority and in control of laws. The gospel furthers the most when we're the most afflicted. When I pray the prayer in the prayer time that asks for a spiritual revival that starts with us, I understand exactly what I'm praying. And it is not prosperity for America. It is hardship, actually, to come that would strengthen the church. I know exactly what I'm praying. And my urging is that we should all be praying the same thing. Because the church in America is weak. Just is. We have allowed idolatry to slip in. We have allowed idolatry to slip in and carry us away. Do we have the courage to pray for revival, which will naturally bring about the hardship for Christians in our culture? I'm not going to go through it, but I've got this in your notes. I want to urge you to go to 2 Samuel 7:18-29 and read David's prayer to the Lord. I want you to go through and read the Lord's Prayer as an example. Jesus gives this example to us as an example prayer. What I want you to notice in both of those prayers, we know the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive those who have, I have trespassers in my mind. I memorized it. I forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Where in there is a place where we are asking for what we need? Praying for our daily provisions and delivering us from evil. Where in there is it about you? It's not. David's prayer is the same way. Now, what David is doing, David is claiming a promise that God gave to David. But 3/4 of that is exalting the Lord in glory. It's a beautiful prayer. The humility in both of those prayers, the exaltation of God, asking for God's will, humbling ourselves and just asking for our everyday basic needs. This is why God warns Israel back in Deuteronomy 18. Deuteronomy 18, verse 9. When you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of those nations. Why? Because they are filled with death and destruction. That's why. Because when you learn to imitate spirituality, And idolatry don't try to fit in. Dare to be different. Dare to not look like the rest of the world. Yeah, people that agree with you, great. If you don't, that's fine too. It's okay. Because no matter what we do, we love other people. We accept them for who they are. We do not condone their behavior. But we build relationships and rapport with them. It's what we do, regardless of where they're at. It's not about behavior. It's about what you believe. Because when we allow this spirituality, this is why 2 Timothy 3:5, they have a form of godliness, but they lack the power. They've got spirituality. Oh, I'm spiritual. Yeah, okay. Do you know Christ? That's my question. That's my question. And what kind of idolatry have you let slip in your life, in your spiritual life? This is about your heart. Deception and lies are everywhere. This is about humility versus pride, which is actually what we shift our focus to next week. We've defined the world and the church. Now we're going to discover what Jesus actually teaches and imitate him. We're going to go to humility and pride next week. And my urging is that we leave idolatry, think about the ancient faith that we talked about last week, and we learn to pray more biblical, not effective. In our prayer life, we don't ask to be selfish, to spend it on our worldly desires. So does this mean that we don't ask for God to heal people? Absolutely not. Let me tell you what, in my 5 years here, I have seen more prayer answered here than I have in any other church I've been in. Has nothing to do with me. Has the power. We have got a prayer team here. Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, one of the first things I noticed was the strength of the spiritual prayer warriors in this church. Whew. Whew, Lord. This is a praying church, and that is a very good thing. That is an awesome thing. Build on that. Don't let those idolatrous things slip in and take you captive again. The big idea. Be on guard against the subtle. Be on guard against the subtle idolatries that slip into our beliefs. I asked, what are you imitating? I'm gonna slip another word in there. Who or what are you imitating? My proposal, as we work through the rest of the weeks of this series, the rest of the 4 weeks, my proposal that it is a who that we are to be imitating, and that who is the person of Jesus Christ. That's who we should be imitating. That is who we should be imitating. The issue with our culture is that it has slipped into this death culture where you either spend your life trying to avoid it, or you spend your life embracing it. What are two of things that are really popular right now? Zombies. Like, zombie movies are everywhere. Y'all just need to know I hate horror movies. Always have, always will. Don't like them. Don't like zombie movies either. They're ridiculous. I don't like them. They just bleh. But do what? But it's zombies are popular. It is embracing the culture of death, because what is a zombie? The Walking Dead. That's what it is. Right? Or what is the other thing that's popular? Very health craze. It is avoiding death at all costs. And this is what we get wrapped up into. And my sentiment up here in the last series was to live as Christ, to die as gain. If I live on, it's more ministry here on earth. If I die, I get to go and be with Jesus, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not disappointed with that. It's okay. It is okay. Either way we go. And to live in that mindset where we're not embracing this death culture where we're trying to avoid death at all costs, or just embracing it to utter, idolatrousness. It allows you to live in a freedom that is just, wow. Those of you that got it, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, whether you're here or online doesn't make a difference. When you understand living in that mindset, it will change your life. Where are you at this morning? I use prayer as an example. But what other areas has idolatry slipped into our lives unknowingly? Ask God to show it to you. It's okay. He'll show it to you. He'll give it to you in small doses. One of the things over the past 2.5 to 3 years is that subtle revealing of the prideful things in your life. You get one thing, I'll show you that. It's like, oh, okay, here we go with that. And then he'll show you another thing. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that one's a big one. So it's just that shedding away of pride and getting you to a place of humility before his throne.